at a distance, right? But it certainly does affect the way we think about our relationships, of course, right? I mean, I'm not an expert in this area. There's a huge discussion around this. But I don't like to think of digital versus physical. I'd like to think of the complementarity of it. Although there are also huge problems and conflicts, definitely as well, right? Yeah.
I think Singapore is an example of a country that's had a digital ID card for a long time, and citizens in Singapore, if you go there and meet any of them, they just assume it's just a normal course of living, that they have their digital ID card, which has a lot of memory, so their whole medical records and school test scores and credit card information is all there, and they're prized very much, having that card as your ticket to anything in Singapore. And they just learn to adopt and live with it. If in answer to your question, it's just like like we in the U.S. perhaps would deal with our driver's license. It's just part of your being, and you take it everywhere, and you live with it, and you get along just great. I'm sure that'll happen in Japan eventually, even though they'll have some struggles. But I had there are other nations that have been struggling with this. The U.S. has been struggling with this for decades, and the political will is not there to allow the government to create a national ID card. And it's to everybody's dismay who realizes how helpful it would be. But it works out over time.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Digital in public services, right, where Julie and I work a lot, right? Denmark is probably one of the leaders, although I can tell you lots of bad stories about Denmark. Digital by default. 600 or 700 services only available digitally. Wow. What about the digital divide? But what they do, they actually say, what is it about IT which is better than what humans can do? It's managing data, it's applying strict rules to data, it's doing a lot of quick analysis, speed and connectivity, right? Those services which are subject to that, put them online only. Other services like teaching, although you can obviously use IT in teaching and health, but where you need what we call in Denmark warm hands, people to people, right? It's obviously supported by IT. So we say there's a spectrum of different services, of course. So we're not going to replace nursing by robots, where you need warm hands and empathy and sympathy and listening to people's problems and things like that, and home helps, right? But we'll get the robot in the home help to do the cleaning while the visitor is talking to the old person as a human being, right? So we're having a new sort of understanding, I think, about what IT does and what people do. Although that's changing all the time, it's in flux. Think of artificial intelligence, maybe, I don't know. But it's a fascinating area, of course. Right?
And Madam Chair, just to close this point, now what's happening, and that's happening in Japan, is that elderly people in homes are developing emotional connections with robots that are now taking these people in their arms, and robots are becoming more and more like human looking. This is to let you know that's another fascinating field to explore. Thank you.
I think that's a fascinating way to round out our discussion, because we've had a lot of discussion about some of the technical facilitators. We've had discussions about the drivers for innovation. We've had discussions about the broad meaning of sharing. But the theme that keeps coming through, whether we're talking about the built environment or we're talking about security, is community, and that linkage between people that IT facilitates and can break down. And what I've always found, 10 years of thinking about this and studying this, is every time we think humans are about to be replaced or the digital world is going to stop human interactions, the components Jeremy's talking about still seem to come through. I just saw an old friend, Leslie Reynolds, some of you may know that from 10 years ago, I met her at a conference like this. And it was like yesterday, because we stayed in touch on Facebook. So, that real interaction that digital technology creates is something important, and I think needs to be more nurtured And I'll just give you one last story to your point, Jeremy. I rented my permanent home that's by the sea last year through the Sotheby's best real estate agent possible, trusted them. Absolutely one of the most miserable experiences of my life. It was a legal contract. The agent did nothing but sign the bill, sign the contract, take the fee, and send all the complaints to me, which were written in such nasty, legalistic ways. The shower isn't working and it never was. This needs to be fixed now. I got home, my furniture had been rearranged, my space had been, not even acknowledgement to the notes I'd left and the food and wine I'd left. Okay, 45 times I've rented my flat on Airbnb in London, and I have had 43 really positive, really positive connections with people whom I've never met any one of these people, but I talk to them online. I get to know them. They leave presents for my little boy when they come and stay. And the two people who complained, I found a way to make them happier. Had somebody drop off flowers, had them buy chocolates, because it's my home and I want them to have a good experience. And there's that sharing, crowdsourced evaluation. I also don't want them to trash my flat online in the same way I want them to take care of it offline. And so that power of kind of shared referrals, again, makes us treat each other as humans. There's a consequence to sending a nasty text in the sharing economy that there isn't in the traditional legalistic, you signed a contract, therefore if the shower isn't working, I'm going to give it to you. So I think, there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of threats, there's a lot of scary things like robots and humans being attached to us, but there's a very positive humanizing element, and there is an element, I think, that the sharing economy is showing of the way in which technology can actually bring us back to that village sense of community, that urbanization and mass sprawl that was necessitated by a lack of technology created. And I think in a funny way, technology is a way of bringing us back to that village community of sharing assets and sharing time and connecting with each other, whether we live in proximity or not. But with that, I really would like to thank my panelists because they rose to the challenge of giving us time to have a really great discussion, to approach this topic from a multiplicity of perspectives, and especially to thank my chair for driving 7 hours and giving us a great presentation despite a lack of voice. So thank you very much, everybody.